Hello, everyone. I will give folks a moment to join the webinar today, and we'll get started in about 15 seconds. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. You're joining us to discuss narrowing the generational wealth gap for Black women. This is a Forte Change Makers virtual series, and we are so happy to have you join us today. I'd like to quickly introduce our panelists for today. Joining us, we have Sukari Brown Gaylor. She is from Cambridge Associates, and she is also a graduate of the University of Virginia Darden School of Business. Our panelists today include Kaya Ladejobi. She is the CEO of Earn Into Wealth, and she is a graduate of the Samuel Curtis Johnson Graduate School of Management at Cornell University. And we also have joining us today Nikoa Milton Gulstone. She's the co-founder and CEO of Level and is a graduate of Columbia Business School. Thanks everyone for joining, and I'm going to hand it over to Sukari.
Thank you, Wendy, and hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive even deeper into the discussion, we have a poll to see who's in the room today so that we can make sure we are doing our best to address the concerns of all of the folks who are represented. So the poll should be launched, and there you go. So please feel free to, select your choice. We'll keep it open for a few more seconds, and then we'll close it. Alrighty, I think we can close it now. All right, so based off of the survey, it looks like majority of the folks joining us today identify as millennials, so with 67%. Gen X is 22%, and Gen Z 11%. Thank you all for participating. That makes it a lot easier for us to have a great discussion today. So with that, I'll jump right into just some quick facts to set the stage for everybody. In 2021, Goldman Sachs actually released a research report entitled Black Womanomics. You can find it online for free. It's very interesting. I highly recommend. In that report, they dug into the economic disadvantages that Black women in particular face. Some key stats that came out of that is the median Black household owns nearly 90% less wealth than the median white household, and that gap is even slightly larger or about the same for single Black women relative to single white men. Lower levels of earnings for Black households, particularly Black women, are really what drives 2/3, so a majority of that wealth divide. And additional things which we'll discuss later around access to capital, investment opportunities, safe and secure housing, all of those also contribute, unfortunately, to this extreme wealth gap. In considering that, the earnings gap, like we said, which represents 2/3 of the issue driving behind that, the wealth gap, it will typically cost full-time, year-round Black women workers over $900,000 over a 40-year career because of this gap. Now, I don't know about you, but I could do a lot with $900,000 over 40 years, right? And so, and even despite educational gains for Black women, we are still typically paid less than our white non-Hispanic male counterparts who are also working full-time year-round jobs. And even when we look at the occupations, Black women face a wage gap in each of the 10 occupations where we are most likely to work. Unfortunately, many of those jobs are low-paying jobs, so we are overrepresented in lower-paying industries and occupations. Go to the next slide. Thank you. And so, as highlighted by the research from Goldman Sachs, again, I highly recommend reading the report, but even research from the American Association of University Women, The wealth gap can really be traced to a variety of historic injustices against the Black community, including things like segregation, redlining, unequal access to funding. And those barriers are further exacerbated with things like student loan debt, disparities in health, and wage equity, as well as some of the other things on the screen. So that hopefully sets the stage for everyone here today. Transitioning a little bit from something that's, we're not happy with these stats, but let's get us back in a better mood right now. I want to start off with pulling in our two amazing panelists today, Kaya and Nikoa, to kick us off with just sharing a little bit about your backgrounds. And maybe it would be helpful to also talk about what inspired you to start your business, particularly with a focus on improving wealth and supporting financial resources for Black women. So I'll go to Kaya first and then turn over to Nikoa.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. I am Kaya Ladejobi, and I received my MBA from Cornell, like Wendy said. I run a wealth practice for high-achieving women. So most of my clients are women who want to live a balanced life, enjoying the present without compromising the future. And, from the poll, a lot of you who are Gen X and Gen Y, the millennials, are kind of in that core group of folks that I set out to serve when I created my firm. So I'm really excited to be here, and I look forward to getting into the topics.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm Nikoa Milton Gulstone, and I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio, but Washington, D.C. is home. I got my undergraduate degree from Howard University. I can never not say that I went to Howard because I'm such a proud Bison. And my MBA from Columbia Business School. I spent the first 15 years of my career in finance and commercial real estate across sectors and asset classes. And I have experience in transactions and asset management and debt capital markets, but it was my traumatic experience as a Black woman in those spaces that led me to start my company, Level. And back in 2019, there was a rise in professional women's networks, and they touted, really caring about diversity, but they always fell short of attracting and retaining women of color. And my co-founder had gone to a bunch of these events that were put on by these organizations, and she came to me and, she asked what it would take to really start a women's network from the ground up that was intentionally diverse. And because I spent, 60 hours a week at least working with white folks, I had no desire to do that. But what I was interested in was creating a business, a fund for Black women like me who were resourceful and smart and tenacious, but didn't come from wealth, so couldn't just quit their jobs. So what Level is a professional women's network that's intentionally made up of 50% Black women, 50% non-Black women. And we come together for the purpose of being angel investors to Black women-owned businesses, because we believe that if we don't do it, who will?
Thank you. Thank you both. And Nikoa, it looks like we got a few Howard folks in the crowd. Present. So thank you both for kind of setting the stage there with your backgrounds. At the beginning of the presentation, I shared a few stats, right, around some common barriers that Black women face when building wealth. Some of those things include retirement readiness, the access to capital, and unfortunately just a running list, right? What are other barriers that you all are seeing based off of the work that you're doing, even your own personal experience that you think it's important for folks to be aware of? And Nikoa, I want to start with you, and then we'll go over to Kaya afterwards.
Sure. First, I'll say that, Black women, we've been in survival mode for so long, and we don't know what we don't know. There are so many asset classes and so many ways to invest your money, but as I've learned throughout my journey, wealthy people pay people to make decisions about their money and how it should be invested. And they have accountants who know how to preserve their wealth. So, there's a huge knowledge gap, and we're starting, we're building from the ground up, and we're trying to gather the knowledge while also trying to make the investment. So we're at a disadvantage in terms of knowledge. Also, we tend to take care of everybody and their mama. We're trying to build wealth and take care of our immediate family, but also we're more likely to have extended family that we contribute to financially as well. And finally, it often takes us longer to get into higher paying jobs, and we have to negotiate our worth, and time is a major factor in growing your money. And the less time you have to invest, the less time your money, the less time your money can accumulate earnings.
That makes total sense. I mean, I would say that, there is a gender wealth gap and then there's a racial wealth gap, and Black women are at the intersection of both experiences. So it makes it even more challenging for us. And I mean, women in general, we need more wealth. We live longer than men. Our personal safety depends on it. Wealth is political power so that we can maintain our rights, and the world needs us, right? So, these are all good reasons why we really need to prioritize the ability to build wealth so that we can sort of do all the things that we need to do. There are two broad reasons why I believe that we struggle with building wealth. The first is the ability to save. And I'll touch up on, what those components are that impact our ability to save. And then the second is our ability to grow the savings that we have, right? So, Black women struggle with savings for a variety of reasons. Lower incomes, depending on the kind of jobs that we take, or us not negotiating our packages, more debt, consumer debt, student debt. And then there's also single parenthood or divorce, right? All of these things contribute to our ability to not have money that's left over that we can save and invest and grow. The second broader category is, when it comes to growing what we are saving, right? And the two factors come into play is the investing gap. A lot of us are not investing because, like Nikoa said, there's the knowledge gap related to that. And then what I find too is that, Black women sometimes seem to have a lower risk tolerance when it comes to the kind of investing options that we pursue. And if we're chasing investments that are safer, right, there's a relationship between risk and return, right? So if you are pursuing safety as your primary criteria, you're more likely to put your money in vehicles that don't grow as much. Yes, you preserve your capital if you're, putting your money in a high yield savings account versus investing in a stock market, or, a lot of people in our communities hyper focus on real estate as the investment choice because it's tangible, we can see it. But, some of those types of investments also have a lower rate of return than, say, investing in the stock market. So these are some of the things that I see that sort of like hold us back when it comes to building wealth.
And you both bring up some interesting points. I love what you said, Nikoa, at the top of your comments on like us being in survival mode, just given all the things that we tend to be responsible for, and how that ties into what you were saying, Kaya, particularly around our ability to save and grow those savings. And even on your point on kind of our risk tolerance, I invest in companies and businesses as a person that works in private equity and venture capital. And when I started in the industry, one of the pieces of feedback I got was like, I'm always very pessimistic about an investment. And it takes a lot to convince me why we should do it. And so even that mindset was trickling over into my professional career, where I do it as a living, right? And I had to unlearn some of those thoughts or behaviors. So it does take that awareness and consciousness, even for someone who's working in this space, right? So with that, we talked a little about some of the barriers, maybe some of the reasons. What are some of the steps that Black women can take today to really better educate themselves on this topic of building wealth? All of us, the three of us here, really prepared and have experience working in the space, so we may have some more tangible knowledge. But for those on the call that are joining us, what are some of those steps that they can take today to get educated? And Kaya, I'll start with you if you don't mind.
Sure. I mean, I would say that, there are a variety of ways to sort of learn and increase your comfort levels when it comes to the topic of money and wealth. Really sort of low cost things are getting books from the library, books in the area of money and wealth and investing, joining communities that normalize what it is for women to invest, the barriers that we face, reading publications that, there's a variety of publications that cover these topics. Like, honestly, it's really surrounding yourself with the community of people who are like-minded like you, who are focused on, saving and investing, where you can ask questions in a safe space and get the answers that you need. That's what I would say is like a good starting point, just to like increase your knowledge and to learn. Even before I became a financial advisor, when I was in college, like I read so many books on this topic, and I know, like the Susie Ormans, the Dave, like everybody, Michelle Singletary is a Black woman who had a long-standing column in the Washington Post. I lived in the DC area. I went to University of Maryland for my undergrad. I would read her column religiously. And so like all those little bits and pieces of information sources will really increase your level and your vocabulary when it comes to topics of money and wealth building.
And I'll just piggyback and say, I'm not an expert in this area at all, and the knowledge that I'm sharing is just personal experience. So Kaya is much more well-versed in the strategies, but what's worked for me is really having mentors that I can talk to about money and ask, questions that I wouldn't typically be comfortable asking people who I didn't know. So my girlfriend, who's become a mentor, she's more seasoned in her career and she's made more money and has figured it out herself how to invest it through different avenues. And she shares all her tips and tricks and also her resources. So now her accountant is my accountant, and I'm learning from them. And as Kaya mentioned, I have many Black women in my orbit who are figuring it out, but we're learning from each other. And I also say, don't be afraid to step into something that you don't completely understand. I find that, we as Black women especially want to know everything before we even dip our toe. But you can learn as you go, as long as you're taking, the appropriate amount of risk for yourself.
I love that. Learn as you go. And I know some folks were asking specific books or podcasts, anything that come top of mind for you, either of you, on that?
So many choices. I actually was just putting into the chat. What I can do is I can curate a list of books and publications that would be good, and we can kind of disseminate that. But there's so many choices. And what I would say is like, it's good to have, diverse perspective, because there's no one size fits all, right? It's going to depend on like where you are in your journey, what tax bracket you're in, how much you make, for my focus, I work a lot with, I would say, early to mid career professionals, typically people who are earning at least, 6 figures in income. And a lot of times, some of the advice that's out there that's designed for the masses may not necessarily be appropriate for like the professional MBA crowd, people who are making, 6 figures or more, who are getting equity comp as part of their packages. So, if that describes you, then like maybe, listening to Dave Ramsey telling you to have $1,000 emergency fund, that may be like, just too basic for you, because you may have larger bills, you may have larger fixed expenses. So I always think it's important to kind of do a quick assessment of like where you are, and then you want to pursue appropriate resources for somebody in your stage, right? Same way, the advice that you're someone who is, 2 years away from retirement is going to be very different from the advice that someone who's in their 30s or in their 40s, still climbing the career ladder. That's going to be different from the advice they need. So I think it's really important to have some curation and talk to your peers who you think are doing well, and say like, who are you using? What are you reading? Right. And network that way, because I think that relevant advice to your like life stage and your financial stage is really, really important.
Yes, I definitely agree. The level of discernment, right? Because especially in the age of everybody has a podcast and a YouTube channel, you do not want to get caught slipping taking advice from someone that's going to end up on the FBI's most wanted list.
That's true.
But thank you so much, Kaya, and I know you're going to share that list. So folks, stay tuned for that. Okay, so we talked a little bit about better educating ourselves, or ways that we can. Let's think about the tangible strategies, that we can take that first step, the first actionable thing. what is like that top strategy from your perspective that can really best help the particularly Black women, especially those on the call, in building or starting that wealth building journey?
I'll jump in and say that, what has been most helpful for me, even when there was like no money to really, budget, was to keep a budget. I'm a firm believer that you have to know where your money is going and you should be telling it where to go. It's helped me feel like I have control over my money and not vice versa. And it's been very useful in helping me to prioritize what I spend and when. I project out weekly for at least a year, which may be excessive, but it really allows me to see, what's coming in, what's going out, when things may be a little tight, and where I have wiggle room to, put more money aside to invest. And it really helps me set financial and investment goals. And then I also say, don't be afraid to invest with friends who you trust. You could start dabbling in the stock market, but if you are, more risk averse, and at Black folks, we do love real estate. I've pooled money with friends to invest in real estate because I couldn't just write like a $50,000 check, but I could get, several friends together to write smaller checks, which felt a lot safer to me, but it also allowed us to learn more about, that particular asset class.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I like to say like there's four things, right? That four categories of things that you should be doing to sort of overcome the barriers. And it's about focusing on what's in your control. So the first is like increasing income, right? Like what are the things that you can do to increase your earning potential? Because a lot of us, if we're Gen X or Gen Y, the wealth that we are actually going to build in our lifetimes, we haven't made that money yet, right? So it's like it's about harnessing your human capital and like turning that into financial capital. So what are the things that you can do if you're a business owner or if you are an employee? What are the things that you can do in your career to grow how much money you make, right? So investing in those things, paying for conferences, like not waiting for people to tap you on the shoulder to be like, hey, you want to go to this? If you think that it's going to put you in the room full of people who have your next promotion or your next client, like invest in the things that is going to help you increase your income. The second thing is minimize expenses. And like Nikoa said, your budget and like managing your cash flow and really understanding where there's waste, what are the things that you can eliminate that you don't need. And, I am a firm believer in the fact that you can't cut your expenses on your way to wealth, right? There's certain things that are just baseline that makes us feel human. So I'm not going to tell you not to get your daily Starbucks if that's what makes you feel alive, but it's really sort of in the big categories. These are the life-changing things, like the kind of house you buy. Is it too much house? Or the kind of apartment you're renting? Is it too much? Is it too much? Like there are like large areas of our spending that really move the needle. And if we get those big rocks right, all of the other things are a little bit simpler. So really thinking about for you, depending on your priorities, whether you're trying to, start a business or something like that, you want to make sure that you have an eye on your expenses. And then the third is investing for growth. Like we just said, it's like really having your eye on growing the nest egg that you have, not being afraid of, I find that like the fear comes from lack of knowledge, right? Once you realize kind of like how easy it is, it's not always easy, but once you realize how straightforward it is and you get the right guidance and the encouragement and someone to talk you off the ledge from selling everything in your portfolio whenever there's like a crazy blip in the stock market, like those things are really helpful. And then the fourth is really protecting your assets, right? In particular, for all of us who are still accumulating wealth, right? Gen X, Gen Y, even if you're a boomer and you're still, saving for investing for retirement, what are all the things that you can do to protect your wealth? Do you have enough disability insurance, right? Our biggest asset is our ability to work and earn money. So, a lot of people don't even think about that. Like what's going to happen to your financial life if you have an illness and can't work for 2 years, or if you get injured. So that's something I stress a lot for, people who are still sort of in their careers and working is, do you have enough disability insurance? If you have people depending on your spouse, children, do you have enough life insurance? Does your spouse or your partner have enough life insurance, because you have to think about all the things that can destabilize your financial life and plan and have a plan in place to mitigate those losses. And that's kind of where those pieces come into place. Property. So, because as you're building these things, you have something to lose. A lot of people don't always think that they're wealthy. And so they feel like, I don't have to protect anything. What do I have? Right. A lot of people don't even know when their net worth crosses $1 million because they don't really spend a lot of time doing the math. Like, what are all of my assets? What are all of my liabilities? And really seeing that, like, they might not feel wealthy, but on paper, like they have more money than they think they have. So they really ought to be protecting it. So I think if you focus on those four things: increasing income, minimizing expenses, investing for growth, and protecting your assets, like these are good guidelines to help you sort of overcome the wealth barriers.
I love that. And, if I could just add, I would say, don't think this is something that's going to just change in 24 hours, right? It didn't take you 24 hours to get into, if you're in a challenging situation or not. It's going to take a little bit of patience, but the important part is to have that dedication, to have the end in mind, to know and have the awareness of some of the things that have been stated about what you need to consider if you haven't considered them. And so it's a lot of times right now, especially with social media, we see the glitz, the glam, this person paid off this debt, this person opened this new business location, and that's great for those people. We often don't know what's behind that, but just make sure that you are keeping that in mind. And a strategy that me and my husband are using right now is looking at goals broadly and breaking it down. Instead of having, for this year of 2020, this is everything I want to do, saying for the first 12 weeks, these are our goals. We will revisit against whatever those goals are, add some, take some away. And when you break it down into chunks, some of these things that are being said today can seem less overwhelming, especially if you're fairly new to it. So I wanted to offer that to the crowd as well. All right, so let me just do a quick time check here. Oh, Kai, do you have something?
Yeah, there's something else I wanted to add. And there's this great book. I know the author, Mariko Chang. I think she's a PhD, and she wrote this book called Shortchanged. And it says, why it's shortchanged, why women have less wealth and what we can do about it. And in this book, she introduced this concept of wealth escalators. And it's something I like to bring up in particular when speaking to women and, women of color in particular, that a lot of us, so what are the wealth escalators? If you think about an escalator, like you stand on it, you don't have to move, you can move, but it's going to get you to the top no matter what you do, right? And so that's kind of how I want you to think about wealth escalators. These are like things that are written into the tax code that if you engage, it's going to help you grow your wealth, right? What are these basic things? Tax deferred retirement accounts, right? Long-term capital gains. What are the tax deductions that, mortgage interest deduction is government subsidized housing, right? Qualified business income if you're a business owner, the workplace fringe benefits, right? The matching your employer gives you, equity compensation, the flexible spending care account, the dependent care account. Like, there are so many things that are sort of like low-hanging fruit that if you just engaged, you would actually reap the benefits. A lot of you might work at places that offer a stock purchase plan where they give you a discount if you participate. You get 15% off the stock or whatever. There's so many things that I find that a lot of women are afraid they don't participate. And so I just want to highlight that we all have like wealth escalators that are available to us either through our jobs or our business ownership, that we shouldn't sort of like let go of those things. We need to take advantage of them because men are, and as the research in this book kind of talks about, is like women are less likely to be in jobs that offer these things. And when we are in the jobs that offer those things, we ignore them or we don't take advantage. And so I just want you to pay attention to that when you're considering job opportunities or career opportunities. And if you do end up in places that offer those, fringe benefits and like, things, like you want to make sure that you are participating because it's an easier way to build your net worth.
Great point, Kaya. Thank you for adding that on. And something that I guess came to mind as you were speaking is, both of you are entrepreneurs. Were there things when you were starting your entrepreneurial journey that maybe you didn't consider that now you wish you could have told yourself at the beginning? Because I think we might have some business owners or early, folks thinking about entrepreneurship, but maybe not in the context of wealth building or wealth creation. Anything that you could kind of reflect on and think, wish you knew back then?
I thought entrepreneurship was going to be a lot easier. I mean, everyone tells you that it's hard, but I thought that corporate America was like hard. I mean, and it was, but entrepreneurship, for me, there have been no days off. Like I eat, sleep, breathe, level, while also, raising 4 children and I have a husband and a dog. And it's just, it never really turns off. And I think that knowing what I know now, I probably would have like tried to turn it off a bit more in the beginning. It's hard to build and it's hard to raise money, but it's also very important, especially as Black women who tend to take care of everything and everyone, to make sure that we take care of ourselves. And I haven't really done a phenomenal job of that. And it's really hard for me to do. And I think a lot of type A women who are career driven, it's hard for us to do that, but it's really important, not just for us, but for our communities, for us to take care of ourselves.
That's so true. I mean, I would say for me, and I think for a lot of you who are in the audience, and this is a Forte Foundation webinar, so you may have that professional degree background, or you may be considering an MBA, or you already have one. I would say the biggest thing for me, like I started my company in 2015. I was probably 3 years out from my MBA degree. I was in a 6-figure job. I kind of knew what that trajectory was going to look like. And the scariest part was actually like quitting what, was a coveted sort of lucrative career path to be like, I'm going to start a company from zero and no clients, and I'm going to use my money, and so like, and when you look around, like there was nobody from my MBA class, right? There were people going to startups and stuff, but like, the women have more education, right? We are good students. We're more likely to, we're risk averse, right? So even like making the leap to start a company, I see that a lot of women, unless they're forced to, it's not always like what we jump to. But I think that if that is you and you're thinking about, starting a company or whatever, like go for it. Like the worst that can happen is that you go back to get a job. And the funny thing that I would tell you is I had more job offers in the first 2 to 3 years of being a business owner. Because just people love that. They love the fact that you're a self-starter, you started something. And so I would just say, like, if you're thinking about starting a business, just do it. Like, prepare yourself financially, because you may not make money for a while. You might actually have to put your own money into growing your company. But if you lay the foundation right, it can be a lucrative experience over the long term, right? It's not always short-term focus. And there will be times where you will look at your peers getting their promotions and, their companies going public and all the other things, and you may feel left out. But if that is the path that is going to help you fulfill your mission, I think it's definitely worth it. And you just have to surround yourself with the right community of other business owners, especially if your network is full of, management consultants and marketers and people who are in corporate paths, because you will feel lonely. So I just want to share that.
No, thank you both. And I would say if there's anyone in the audience that's currently has a business and or still on the fence, how I built this as a podcast that I think is an easy kind of entry level listen. That it's great to hear the stories of other people, but what I find that it can do is it inspires you to think bigger about the opportunity for your business in the different ways of bringing in revenue, or the different ways of expanding your business and the services that it offers, or the different exit opportunities of getting someone to acquire it, or some sort of licensing agreement. I think it just exposes you to a variety of different things to think about along your wealth building journey and your, building your business empire. All right. So speaking of your businesses, both of your businesses have that element of community and really kind of anchored in community. And so curious as to how using that strategy of tying in community to the work that you're doing has really helped you transform the lives of women, and particularly Black women. And Kai, I would love to hear from you, and then turn over to Nikoa.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, I'm a certified financial planner, and I would say there's about like 90,000 CFPs who have this designation, and probably less than 2% of them are Black. And if you try to find those who are Black and female, you're probably going to get an even smaller number. So I understand like the role that I play in my industry of financial services and wealth management. That's very, that's very wide, that's very older, already wealthy sort of client, and really sort of standing out as someone who created a firm to serve people who were builders and accumulators and still trying to get to their first million in assets, or if they're already sort of further along, or they're trying to get to their next 2, 3, or 4 or 5 million in assets by the time they're age 60, right? So I definitely understand that. And so I like to do things like this when it comes to getting in front of people that look like us, and then also connecting my clients, right? So there are a lot of people who are trying to navigate certain aspects of their career. And one of the things I enjoy doing is really kind of being like a middleman who can match people with like, oh, you're trying to do this. I know just the person who's done that. You both should talk, right? Or I have a number of clients who are, older in their career, and they've decided, hey, you know what, like, we really want to be parents, and like we haven't met the guy yet, and like we're gonna go and like have our children, and they're at the stages in their career where they can afford to do that, right? And even being able to connect people who've done it before so they can help each other achieve that personal life goal. These are some of the things that I really enjoy, and really sort of like curating, a community and experience of people who are trying to also like build their wealth, achieve their life dreams. But it's nice to like talk to somebody who has done it before. So I really love that aspect of what I do in like sort of curating and like connecting women together in community.
Yeah, and I would say, my mother taught me the value of community when I was very young. She didn't necessarily say it, but I watched how she and her girlfriends really relied on each other for all kinds of things, whether it was help with their kids or aging parents, finding a job. They were a shoulder to lean on when life was lifing, or if they needed a loan and found themselves in a difficult situation, you name it. She showed me what it meant to show up for the people who were important in her life. And what we set out to do at Level was bring women together, to invest money in Black women. But the unexpected byproduct of that is that not only are we transforming these entrepreneurs' lives, but we're transforming the lives of the women who signed up as members, and not just the Black women. So I have so many examples of what working together in a community of incredibly talented women can produce. One of our members was introduced to another woman who's part of our community who runs a VC firm, who then introduced her to her first investor, and Kelly was able to quit her corporate job to pursue entrepreneurship full time. We've had members hire each other, help each other negotiate salaries. They've had play dates with their kids, and they show up in crisis. You think back to March of 2020, right at the start of COVID. My father was actually one of the first cases of COVID at the hospital that he was in, and it was probably one of the scariest times in my life. And after 3 weeks of him being on a ventilator, they told us that there was nothing else that they could do. And I knew that the information that they were giving us was not accurate, because my ICU nurse friend was calling to get daily updates. And the first thing I did was reach out to the Level community. And sure enough, one of our members' fathers happened to be on the board at that particular hospital. And her dad made a phone call, and the standard of my father's care turned around, and he's at home and riding his Harley. And that really is like the power of the community that we're building. So we're not just, focused on transactions and building wealth, but we're doing that, but we're really focused on humanity and shifting our society forward together. And the only way that I know how to do that is in community.
Wow, very powerful from both of you. Thank you for sharing. I do want to highlight that we have the Q&A open. We're going to wrap up with our last like formal question, but please drop any questions into Q&A for the open session after this. So our last question here is, what's the best piece of advice that you've received when it comes to your wealth building journey? And I can start us off, and then to give you guys a second, and then I'll turn over to Kaya and then Nikoa. For me, I would say the best piece of advice I've received is really starting where you are and not trying to do 15,000 things at the same time. And so I think Kaya may have mentioned this at the top of her remarks around understanding where you're at in the context of the advice and strategies you're seeking. And honestly, once I actually like listened to that, it made the starting this journey a lot less overwhelming, and a lot less feeling like it's impossible to achieve whatever goal I have. So that would definitely be the best piece of advice for me. So Kai, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I would say my advice is very similar to what you just said. My biggest thing is get started and get help, because not getting help is costing you more money than you realize. And I'll give a quick example. So I recently met with a young Black woman who she was exploring sort of working with an advisor, and we had this call, and at the end she was like, well, I'm trying to understand, like, is this worth it? Like, is it worth it for me to pay an advisor? What am I going to get out of it? And so then I told her, I said, well, here, let me give you an example that's specific to you, where if we had been working together, I could have saved you a lot of money. So this woman, she bought a home probably 3 years ago, and, modest home, and she put down 50% for her down payment. Right. And so when I spoke to her, I said, hey, let's quantify how much not having somebody in your corner is costing you. And we did the math, and essentially, had she only put down 20% and had invested the difference, she would have an extra $120,000 today. Because I actually pulled up a calculator and said, hey, if you had been invested in the stock market in October 2020 up through January 2024, and you had put that money in, this is how much money you'd have by now, right? And she's missed out on mortgage interest deductions, because a lot of times when we have our money locked up in home equity, it's not really working for us, right? We're not making money. So you want to make sure that you manage your debt levels, but you're investing the difference. So I showed her, I said, not having someone to tell you the right thing to do, the opportunity cost of that is there's $40K a year that you're not making. Right. And that's going to continue to compound, because now it's impossible to get them. It's not impossible to get the money out, but she's locked in a nice mortgage rate. Right. So that's just an example of, like, a lot of times we're not accustomed to paying for help. Our parents didn't have advisors. Our parents didn't have helpers. We want to do it all ourselves because we want to save a buck. But, a lot of people have complex finances, and they won't hire a CPA to do their taxes, and they miss out, or they do it wrong and they get audited or something like that. So I just want to remind us that it is normal to pay for help, and, like, we should be all about that, because we're going to save and make a lot more money than we ever pay for that help. And so just get started, essentially.
And that's my advice too. Just get started. There are tons of apps where you can invest $5 weekly just to play around and learn the stock market. Stash, Robinhood are a couple that I've dabbled in. And also, to Kaya's point, pay for help, find a good accountant, because they can help you determine whether or not you should have an LLC or an S Corp. They have tons of strategies that can minimize your tax liability that we just aren't really familiar with. So I would say get started, even if it's, very small, and also find a good accountant that you trust and has experience with working with wealthy clients.
All right. Well, thank you both for sharing those strong, amazing pieces of advice. We're going to open it up now to Q&A from the audience. As a reminder, if you do have a question, please drop it, leverage the Q&A function to submit it. We will do our best to get through them. So just kind of coming off of the remarks you both just made, the question I want to start with is, Someone's asking, is it ever too late to start investing? And the context that was offered is her family experienced financial hardships in their 20s and 30s, and now starting to have money in their bank accounts with 2 children, one headed to college in about 4.5 years. It's intimidating to kind of start investing. They have savings, but the thought of not knowing how to proceed is daunting and scary. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely never too late to start investing, because we have to remind ourselves that, like, people don't take all of their money out of the stock market when they're 65 and retired, right? Your money still has to continue growing literally until the day you die because of inflation and all these other things. So just have it in your mind that you have to be a lifelong investor in order for you to maintain your lifestyle. So whether you're 45 or 65 or 70, you still need to invest so that you can maintain your portfolio and continue to rely on it for income. So start today. And to add to the piece about you having kids who are going to college, it's still not late to start college savings accounts for those kids if you don't have it, because starting this year, the IRS just started allowing people to convert up to 35K of leftover money in a 529 to a Roth IRA, which you can use to jumpstart sort of wealth building for your kids as well. So now there are rules as far as how long you have to have the account open and everything, but if you start now, the sooner it is that you can take advantage of those things. So I just want you to keep that in mind. And like, it's never too late to invest, basically.
And I'll just jump in and say, I see you. I have 4 children. One is a junior in high school, and I'm trying to figure out how we're going to make it all work. But I would say find a mentor so that it becomes less scary and you can at least like take the first step. My goal is to leave wealth for my children. So even if I, hadn't started yet, starting today means that, I still have hopefully at least another 40 years to live at least. And that money will be passed down to them so they don't have to work quite as hard in figuring it out.
So actually, kind of coming off of that, 2 questions came in around a similar issue or thought of, how do people select financial advisors? One of the questions mentioned, there's some reports of people who have had been ill-advised by financial advisors and end up losing a lot of money. How do you properly vet a financial advisor or an accountant? And how do you identify who to select, especially if you're not yet at 6 figures, if maybe you're under it? So any thoughts on that for the audience?
Yeah, this is a question that I love. So I would say that our community, we're very right to be skeptical of anybody sort of saying, because we've been victims of a lot of sort of bad advice and bad helpers. And I would say you have to use your discernment, but there are also resources, right? Like on my website, and I can add it to the list of things that I share. I have a guide that says 20 questions that you should ask before hiring an advisor. And it goes through like, are you a fiduciary? Are you licensed? What kind of license do you have? What kind of clients do you serve? How do you charge your clients, right? Because not every advisor is going to be a right fit for you, right? So you want to make sure that that person you're looking to hire serves people who look just like you, it's not just looks, but whose financial picture resembles yours and they're equipped to help somebody in your position. So a couple websites I'll share. Fee Only Network is a place where you can find advisors who are fee only. What that means is they don't earn money on commissions or all the other things. The only way they get paid is from what you pay them for the advice. So Fee Only Network, I recommend. And then there's like other ones like notfor.org, but there are definitely ways for you to find someone who's credentialed. You want to see that they have maybe a CFP, which stands for Certified Financial Planner. So, but I'll share that sort of 20 question guide because I think it helps and it's something you can apply to any advisor or professional that you're looking to hire.
And everyone who I've hired to help me has been by word of mouth. And they've come from folks who I trusted. And I'll also say that, finding the right person is also kind of like dating. Like you may meet with one or two and they may not be a good fit for you for whatever reason. You may feel judged, you may feel uncomfortable, I mean, for whatever reason. And I just say you have to find the right fit so that you are comfortable accepting and receiving the help that they're trying to offer.
Kaya, I definitely am going to download that 20 questions list. So thanks for throwing that out there. I'd see we have a question here around kind of actually pivoting back to the entrepreneurial journey for both of you. The question is, what resources did you use to start or fund your companies?
We bootstrapped. And then we like built the plane as we were flying it. So, you know, we relied on our MBAs and we relied on our networks. We had a ton of mentors, but we didn't really read any books. We just kind of got started. And for me, it was a necessity because my mental health and my physical health and my corporate job were just taking a turn for the worse. So I had to get out. So I didn't have like the option to take it slow and figure it out. I literally just kind of figured it out as I built the company, and we bootstrapped it and funded the company.
Same here. I would say, you know, the most important things I did and prioritized post-graduate school was paying off my student loans. I did get married in between first and second year of business school. So did have the benefit. I never want to sort of, you know, gloss over privileges that I may have had as a married woman. Did have the privileges that I did have a working spouse. And what we did was we lived on one income, and I literally sent all of my paycheck to the student loan company for the first 2 to 3 years. And the moment I was debt free, I just felt, I was like, we're debt free. We don't have kids yet. Like, this is the perfect time to take the risk of starting a company. And like, just did it, right? Saved up for it. There were times, you know, where I used, you know, savings that we already had earmarked for other things. I think if you believe in yourself and if you believe in what you're trying to do, especially if you're not building a typical startup, right? You may find that depending on the kind of business you're trying to build, there may not be a lot of external funding available for it. So you're just going to have to fund it yourself. And then when you get to the point where you have enough of a track record and financials, then you can start to seek like a business line of credit or other external sources. But a lot of those things aren't typically available for sort of pre-revenue entities. So depending on what you want to start, just know that you have to find the appropriate type of financing for those types of entities.
And that's honestly really why Level exists, because we know how difficult that is for Black women who have not inherited wealth. So we oftentimes provide the first check for women who are launching their businesses. And like Kaya said, like, what a privilege it's been for us to be able to do that. But we recognize that that is not feasible for many folks who look like us.
All right, the next question we have, and this might be our last question. Someone said, I've heard people mention a poverty mindset. Can you talk about what that is and steps we can take to shift to more of an abundance mindset?
I love that. So I would say that, you know, poverty mindset in a way is kind of like a scarcity mindset, right? It's when you have, you know, you want more, but you have a tight grip on what you have, right? So it's a poverty mindset might be like, let's imagine if you're a single woman and and it's important that you have a partner, but like you won't spend $10 to get into a bar that has people that you need to meet, right? You're so focused on like you losing the 10 that you're not opening yourself to the opportunity to get into the room that supposedly has something that you desire, right? So I think like, you know, an abundance mindset is you understanding that like for you to get certain things, you're going to have to put yourself out there. You're going to have to put your money out there. You're going, you know, taking calculated risks, not being frivolous, with things, right? And I think that that's kind of the difference, but it's really hard, especially if we're surrounded with people who have the same mindset. That's why you need to go get into a community of people who are like, oh yeah, my company isn't going to pay for me to go to Afrotech, but I really want to get a new job, or I really want to meet this so-and-so investor. So I'm going to take my own money and buy my ticket because that's where that I need to be in the room. So that's an example of someone who sees what they want and is willing to invest in it. But it's really hard to do that if you're surrounded by people who won't do that or talk you out of doing things that are going to get you where you want to go. So that's what I would share on like the abundance and the scarcity mindset.
Beautiful. I have nothing else to add.
All right. Well, I want to first thank you both, Kaya and Nikoa, for joining us today and making this such a fruitful conversation. I'm sure that the audience, I mean, I know I have notes, and I'm sure the audience was over there taking notes down as well. And thank you to the audience for joining us today and for the amazing questions. And I saw the chat was going crazy at some point, so that's awesome. I think we have a few slides we wanted to just share in closing. So I'll turn it over to either Alexia or Wendy.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. So just a moment as I quickly pull up our slides, our final slides for today. But once again, thank you so much to our panelists, to our moderator, for just having this discussion, because it's clearly a very important one and the timing is so well done, especially given that it's Black History Month. So what I'm going to do is share my screen one final time. This is more just like as a reminder, because we know some people here are not a part of Forte, and so we're really excited to have you here. But we offer a variety of different resources, so feel free to connect with us, whether it's on social. Our website's a great resource to just kind of see the different types of professional development we offer. So one example, we talked a lot about MBAs in this specific panel. We help a lot of women get their own MBAs as well. So just wanted to throw that out there in case you're thinking about different things. And then both of our panelists actually asked us to share this. So this first one, Earn Into Your Wealth. So you can scan the QR code if you're interested in it. I believe I put the go-to talk.ac/Kaya in the chat feature. But again, feel free to definitely utilize this resource because it can be super helpful for you too. And then moving on to the next one. So for our other panelist Level, if you're interested in just getting to know them better, joining this team, please feel free to scan the QR code, or again, they have the website listed here, which is levelleaders.com/join us. Again, both of our panelists, thank you so much for sharing your insight, your knowledge, and your experience with our community. As a final thing, Forte, as far as the next Changemaker, so this event is part of our Changemakers series, where we invite thought leaders to come in and speak to our audience. Our next one is going to be on March 8th, if you're interested, in celebration of International Women's Day. And we're going to be looking at the 6 signature traits of inclusive leadership. So you can head to our website and definitely sign up there if you're interested as well. So again, that's pretty much everything I have. As far as going over, I don't know if Wendy, you have any final notes to make as well. Okay, awesome. So
Thanks,
again,
everyone.
Yeah, honestly, yeah, just thank you to everybody. And thank you to our audience for being here today as well. So with that, we hope you enjoyed the rest of your day, and definitely reach out if you have any questions for sure.
Right.
All right, bye everyone.